And now, part two of Water to Share. Once they caught up with Isaac, he led them down a long, shallow slope. It wasn't until they reached the bottom and saw the airlock door jutting from the incline that Sandor realized they'd been walking atop the ship. When I crashed, the ship plowed into the sand like a shovel, but over the past 4 years she's been steadily sinking and sandstorms have covered most of her. I've had to dig out this hatch 100 times at least. Zaylin pointed to a small gurgling pond about 20 meters away. Is that your water source? My little oasis, yes. The product of an underground spring. It appeared the day after I crashed. I think my ship gouged out a channel somewhere down there and released enough pressure to push the water to the surface. A lucky accident. Nevertheless, I recommend boiling before drinking. Isaac pulled a lever beside the hatch and turned it to the right. The door slid to the left, but stopped about midway. Isaac leaned into it and pushed it open with a grunt. Sand gets into every damn thing. This way. The sun had faded beyond the horizon, and in the east, past the bronze landmark that had been Isaac's ship, the stars were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. Once inside, Isaac punched in a code on a nearby wall console, and the door slid closed smoothly. Just then, an inner hatch opened to reveal a dimly lit corridor. Let me give you the nickel-plated tour. Geary knew these people were dangerous. He'd heard everything they'd said since their arrival, and had watched as they'd clumsily buried their dead comrade. The woman with the braid, Zaylin, seemed most affected by the loss. She was also clearly disturbed by Sandor's threat to murder Isaac. He filed these observations in the back of his mind. Though he seemed clever, Sandor's maintenance crew story had been ludicrously transparent. They certainly didn't dress like space greasers, and unless society had degraded drastically in the last 3 years, they were too quick to draw their weapons on a lone stranger, and each other. It was more plausible that they had hijacked the cruiser. Still, Geary was well protected. If they should move against him, he knew precisely how to handle them. Isaac led them into a dimly lit maintenance shop with workbenches and tables filled with circuit boards, mechanical parts, and tools of every kind. It was all he could salvage from the ship's aft section. The place reeked of lubricant, and the floor was gritty with sand, some of which had been intentionally used to soak up spilled oil and other mechanical fluids. It made Zaylin feel even filthier than she already was. I've no doubt the parts you need for your cruiser's engines and thrusters can be found among this clutter, or at the very least we can rig something suitable. Plenty of time for that after dinner. I don't want to impose, but is there a place we could clean up first? Zaylin asked. My dear, I can do one better. Follow me. A few of the crew cabins still have working showers. They run through the water filtration system. Recycled water, Sandor surmised. Purified and bacteria-free. You're more than welcome to them. You all look like you could use a change of clothes, too. And there's a selection of various styles and sizes in the closets. All of them clean, some never worn at all. If it fits, it's yours. How do you power all of this? Zaylin asked. Solar panels embedded throughout the entire hull. The engineering section that you were admiring on the way here harnesses the sun's energy and provides power to the rest of the ship buried under the sand. Of course, I keep most of the systems and lights powered off. Some parts of the ship are dark, so don't go wandering. This vessel still carries ghosts. Zaylin looked from Sandor to Shazard. The men seemed amused by the old man's warning. She was not. Ghosts? This was a warship in its prime, young lady, before it was stripped down and used as a cruise ship, and then finally sold off at auction. People died aboard her. What's her name? Sandor asked. Originally, it was Jezebel, sister ship to the Ahab, destroyed in battle. I didn't have time to rechristen her before departing. It's a story for another time. Isaac pointed to a cabin at the far end of the corridor. Knock when you're ready, and we'll go to dinner. My treat. It took 3 minutes for Sandor to decide. 3 minutes and a dozen sissy police uniforms tucked away in the closet of one of the larger cabins. We have to kill him. Shazard frowned as he rifled through the familiar dark green jackets. No badges, no nameplates, but every rank is here from corporal to sector captain. Zaylen shrugged. So he climbed the ranks. That would take decades for a career cop. CISA uniforms changed at least twice in the last 12 years. These are all the same style, the latest one. Plus, not every rank gets a new uniform, Sandor added. That's reserved for commander and above. Below that, you get a new rank insignia. That's it. So why would he have so many uniforms? Shazard dropped the jackets back into the clear tub. They're all the same size, average build. Ever seen a sector captain that wasn't a lard ass after years behind a desk? These can't all belong to one guy. Why don't we just ask him? Zaylen said. Sandor ignored the question. He stared silently at the uniforms for several seconds. Could it be? Isaac is certainly the right age. We're waiting. Androids. Zaylen and Shazard exchanged skeptical glances. It would explain why all of the uniforms are the same size throughout the span of ranks. It might also explain how Isaac managed to survive here for this long. There was a brief experiment 6 years ago that introduced androids into law enforcement. Zaylen nodded solemnly. I remember. But it was terminated when the religious zealots took over the government. The androids were pulled from service, presumably destroyed. Except for the one that got away. Most of the food replicators work, although I've had some corruption in the database, so the menu's a bit limited. Don't order anything with red meat. It locks up the terminal. We'll have to reboot it. Everything else is good. Isaac had escorted them to a crew lounge, complete with rows of tables, each with a plush chair on either side. All the furniture was bolted to the deck. Scattered books, hollow games, circuit boards, and mechanical parts filled some of the tables. The rest, while scratched and chipped, were spotless. The air was redolent of cleaning chemicals. The green and blue upholstery on the chairs was hardly frayed, with one exception. While waiting for Sandor and his crew to order their meals, Isaac sat and played a hollow word game until it was his turn. I wonder if I might ask a favor of your crew member still aboard the patrol ship, Isaac began, when they were finally all seated. Sandor swallowed a bit of bread. Anything. When I was forced to leave my world, I left behind my wife, Hannah. She was terminally ill with one of the few types of cancers that hadn't been cured. Isaac's eyes glistened as he paused briefly. She was in cryonic stasis when I left her. You want us to look up your wife on the grid? Yes, sir. Why were you forced to leave? Zaylen asked. Isaac drew in a long breath. It returned as a sigh heavy with regret. He wiped his eyes as he replied. I was experimenting with nanites for use in repairing and regenerating human organs and tissue. As you well know, the current regime of religious barbarians outlawed any form of artificial life and life-preserving technology. Including androids, Sandor said. Isaac nodded. That was my first project before I turned my attention to nanotech. I had created a series of prototype androids to serve as cops and other hazardous jobs. We piloted them successfully in the Ganzing Belt. An entire drug trafficking operation was shut down with minimal casualties. Well, human casualties. Sandor slid his plate onto the table beside him. Yes, I remember it. System police were on the verge of signing on to expand the use of my androids until the government was overthrown and I was exiled. I see. Sandor relaxed in his chair and muttered. Minimal human casualties. Everyone looked at him just as he pulled his blaster and shot Isaac in the head. The scientist's body slumped. His plate crashed to the deck. Zaylen screamed. Sandor holstered his weapon. My family was killed on Ganzing Belt by your fucking androids. Hours later, Zaylen still refused to speak to him. She had just started to grow fond of Isaac. He reminded her of the better side of her. No, he's long gone, and good riddance. The loss of Nuala had obviously softened her. In their chosen lifestyle, attachments were fleeting. Life was cheap and liable to end without notice, including hers. Yet she also feared being alone. It's what kept her from leaving Sandor, and he took advantage of that whenever it suited him. Shazard emerged from the maintenance shop, hands and arms streaked with grease and a few minor cuts. It's all there. Everything we need, even anti-grav carts to haul it back to the cruiser. How convenient, Sandor said. Tonight we'll sleep in the cabins. At first light, we'll move out. Take some of the clothing with us. Zaylin shook her head. I'm not sleeping in this ship. Isaac said she had ghosts. And you just added one more. He was speaking metaphorically. In the morning, I'll need you to find whatever you can to collect water from that spring outside. Ship's reserves are low. But if you want to leave tonight, feel free. Don't get lost in the dark. Zay held his gaze long enough to realize she would relent yet again, though that's all she would give him tonight. The following morning, Isaac's body was gone, along with the plates, cups, silverware, and other clutter. Aside from the tables and chairs, the crew lounge was entirely empty, as if it had never seen a human soul. The faint aroma of cleanser remained, however. The tattered chair that Isaac had occupied the night before had either been completely reupholstered or simply replaced. Sandor clenched his jaw, shot a sidelong glance at Zaylin. This vessel still carries ghosts. Maybe this is a different crew lounge. No. We don't know this ship, Zay. We could have taken a wrong turn. She shook her head. No. Where's Zard? I don't know. Gathering spare parts? All right, I'll help him. We still need a supply of water. Zaylin held up 2 empty plastic jugs. All I could find. I'll fill them and wait for you outside. I'm not stepping foot back in this ship. Sandor stood in the doorway of the maintenance shop, staring at the empty anti-grav cart that should have been filled with spare parts by now. Damn it, Zard, where the hell are... Zaylin's scream answered his unfinished question. Sandor emerged into the blistering heat, squinting against the unforgiving glare of a binary star morning. To his left, Zaylin stared into the crimson water of the oasis, where Shazard's lifeless body lay prone, bleeding out. She dropped the jugs and trudged off wordlessly, avoiding Sandor's gaze. She scaled the slight incline that led to the top of the buried capital ship and disappeared from view. He made no effort to stop her. Instead, he approached the edge of the oasis and lowered himself to one knee. He reached in with both hands and dragged the corpse of his oldest friend onto the dry, pink sand. The dagger fell out of Shazard's throat, which was cut from one side to the other. Sandor recognized the weapon instantly. He hadn't even noticed it was missing from Zaylin's braid. Apparently, neither had she. Or... He pulled his comm phone from his belt and sent a text message to Neff. Zard is dead. Need your help hauling parts back to the cruiser. Already here. Look behind you. Sandor glanced over his shoulder. Neff stood at the airlock of Isaac's ship. Do you know who did this? Neff shook his head. Why did you come here? Neff responded with another text message. I sent messages overnight to all of you. No one replied. When did you get here? 2 hours ago. You were still asleep. I didn't want to disturb, so I wandered the ship for a while. More than enough time. I'm sorry about Zard. How did you get in? The door's coded. You know I'm a hacker. You were certainly quiet. The mute merely stared at him, his expression deadpan. He seemed to know where Sandor was leading. As such, he moved his right hand closer to his blaster. Sandor did the same. Stop! Zaylin stared down at them from the top of the capital ship. Stand down, boys. He killed Zard. You don't know that. You found him after Sandor held up her dagger. With this. Zaylin fell silent as she reached back and swung her ponytail over her shoulder. She unsheathed the comb. A metal comb. How the hell? You lost this when we crash landed. Zaylin nodded. Neff found it and gave it back to me. He clipped it back onto my braid for me just before I blasted the hole for Nula's grave. And did you check it to make sure the blade was still in it? No, I was distracted and upset. But it felt right. I mean, it had the same weight. Sandor smiled thinly. Many of these hair clasps are made with metal combs. They have about the same weight as the bladed ones. Remind me, where did you get this dagger? Zaylin shifted her gaze to Neff. On Lavoy, around the time we met him. What a coincidence. Sandor twisted slightly, his arm whipping forward. Zaylin watched as her knife found its mark in Neff's forehead. He stumbled forward before collapsing. Around his head, pink sand darkened to red. He saved our lives! Took us in on Lavoy when we had nowhere to go. He was loyal. He had motive. He had opportunity. Sandor lifted his gaze to Zaylin. And he had help. Zaylin started to speak, but he cut her off. Even if Neff somehow managed to hack his way past the airlock, he would have had to find the crew quarters. He couldn't have done that on his own. This ship is a labyrinth. I had no motive to kill Zard, except for the time he raped you. Zaylin felt her mouth drop open. You didn't think I knew about that. And you never did a damn thing about it? You could have left at any time. In fact, you're free to go right now. Oh, but you won't leave me. You can't make it on your own because you're weak. So weak you let yourself get raped. You son of a bitch! Zaylin went for her blaster, but it never left its holster. Instead, she stumbled backward before falling to her knees, gaping down at the smoldering hole in her thigh. Through gritted teeth, she snarled at the pain of scorched flesh. I, on the other hand, have no problem surviving on my own. Sandor's second shot opened her chest. Zaylin toppled onto her side, the palm of her hand pressing into soft pink grit. She thought of Nuala, of their father. Are you together now? She would find out soon enough. Zaylin raised a fistful of sand toward the sky and watched it slip through her fingers until her time ran out.